Pop-O-Holics. Welcome to Pop-O-Holics. We're here again. We're back from Christmas, our Christmas break. Very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah. Very exciting to be back talking with you guys. I missed you. I missed you guys.
I missed you guys. We took a week off.
As much as I love my family, I miss you guys, especially in this time we have together. So it's exciting to be back. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the original, the
OG.
OG. That's a great way to put it. Work of Superman, superhero lore rather, and you can't say superhero without saying half of that of which we were talking about, which is Superman, the 1978 classic by Richard Donner. In this episode, we will be discussing quite a few things, what we think about Superman, him in his different iterations, him being brought to film for the first time, how iconic this movie is in every aspect, and what it leaves us with even still to this day. And as per that, we're celebrating the 40-year anniversary. We're going to make it right under the cut, and by right under the cut, I mean 2 days late.
A little bit after.
2 days late
Right over the cut.
of the 40 years. So technically, this is the 41st year that we'll be entering. So happy 2019, everybody.
Happy 2019. I hope your New Year's Eve was great.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll be starting today the way that we always do, which is just a catch up. I know we were all visiting friends and family over the holidays. How are we doing? We'll start with you, Chris. What's going on, man?
I'm doing well. My wife and I went down south for Christmas Day. We spent some time with my side of the family. We celebrated with her side a couple days before Christmas. So a lot of family time, a lot of driving. It was a good time. It was a good holiday.
Cool? Did you catch up on anything? Did you get anything nice for Christmas?
I got a really cool iPad Pro,
Oh,
which is very dope.
oh, the new
I'm
ones
excited
are so
to-
sick.
They're very awesome. I'm excited to start drawing more and using it more for work and stuff like that. So that was a really cool gift. Today, my wife and I saw Mary Poppins Returns. I don't know if you guys are interested in seeing that or if you have seen it, but it was delightful.
Oh, that's good.
That's
to hear.
how I'm going to describe
seeing
it
for sure.
Yeah,
No interest, but
I figured as much.
as long is there a Dick Van Dyke
Cold-hearted.
stand-in who comes in with like an absurdly iconic bad British accent? That's what.
There's a cameo.
I believe you're
of Dick
talking
Van Dyke,
about
right?
Lin-Manuel Miranda is the new lamplighter. He's not a chimney sweep, but he's a lamplighter. And Brian's right. There is a Dick Van Dyke cameo in the movie.
Ooh, I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda. Ugh, that's tempting.
He's good. I personally thought he was very good. Mickey did not think he was so good. But just like you mentioned,
Did he start rapping about old U.S. American
he
presidents?
did. He did have one sequence in which they gave him a little bit to rap about. It wasn't full on rap, but you can tell they were like throwing him a bone, kind of like,
I'm gonna
hey,
light
this
you
is your
lamp it off
specialty.
your feet. I ain't no chimney sweep.
That was great. That was great. They should have cast you as
I'm the
as
dude
that
from
role.
Hamilton.
Mary Poppins Returns again with Christian Cady writing the screenplay.
Yes,
Yep.
a man much more talented than I could ever even dream of being. I am going to roast and make fun of. I'm just jealous because I can't afford to go see a show. Okay, anyway, Brian, how was your Christmas break?
Christmas break was great. The listeners may be able to tell I got a new microphone. Shout out to my mom for this amazing Christmas present that I was
Mom
not
came
expecting
through.
at all.
Way to go,
Clutch.
Brian's mom.
Oh my god,
She really
clutch,
did. Shout
clutch.
out. She maybe listened to this. Love you, Mom. But yeah, it's
love
been
you
a
too,
great
Michelle.
time. I've had excuse me, don't talk to my mother that way. We had a great time. I've just been relaxing way too much this week, sleeping in. I actually had this week off of work, so I just feel super lazy and been enjoying watching a lot of Superman stuff. Watching and reading. A lot of good family time. I actually got to hang out with Christian when you were in town for on Christmas night itself.
Yeah, we had a Christmas Eve. Yeah, I think it turned Christmas as we were. We drank scotch, which is great.
Yes,
Sounds
yes,
awesome.
Indeed,
Yes.
it was super classy.
Yeah, it was classy.
Stole scotch from your dad.
That's really exciting.
If that doesn't signify or symbolize going home, around the holidays, then I don't know what does.
I was jealous of Brian's Christmas. I was walking me and my girlfriend's dog, and Brian lives right. His family lives right down the street, and I was walking the dog, and you guys were throwing a pretty wild banger, and I was like, Brian didn't invite me to this wild banger, and then I picked up my dog pooped on your lawn. Like on the side of it near your porch. Yeah, vengeance. And then but I'm hearing party, and I heard you laughing, and I'm picking up dog poop. And I was like,
that sounds great, dude.
Yeah. So I had a little FOMO.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. That was it. But it was a beautiful, sunny Christmas in Florida, in Tampa, Florida, where I celebrated it. Me and my girlfriend had a lovely time with my family, and like Brian said, we got to hang out. And it was a good time to chill, and it continuously be jealous of my dad's new 4K TV, which looks incredible. So watched some cool stuff on that, just running demo footage of LG's OLED stuff through there. Super great. So that was very exciting.
The other night when we were hanging out, you said you're thinking about selling yours. Is that one reason you're thinking about selling it?
The trick is they give you so much time to use it as a return policy. There's a special return policy with Walmart, which is where I bought it from. Don't support evil corporations unless they have a hell of a deal. I have 90 days, so I still have from Black Friday until I guess it goes through January that I have, if my math is correct. Maybe my math's wrong. No, yeah, I have till January or something. I'm sitting on it. I'm thinking about it. I think the biggest selling point is I moved my old TV into my room, and I like having that TV. It's really awesome to watch stuff in my room now, which is nice before bed, catching a quick flick. If I want to watch any of my newly furnished Predator collection, I got a hold of
whole game.
That's the prized possession of your movie collection now, right?
That is, but yeah, a lot of great. My family was very thoughtful. Got an Instapot, so I'm excited to cook some veggies in that. It's gonna be very exciting.
Sweet.
Ooh,
anyway,
yeah.
So it sounds like we all had a great Christmas. Please write in and tell us about your Christmas to popoholicscast@gmail.com. Let us know if you saw anything cool, what you'd like for us to talk about in this upcoming year. But Happy New Year, guys! We are in a new year of Pop-O-Holics, and we're going to be making this show the best we can for you. And today's subject, we're talking about Superman.
Kal-El, you do not remember me. I am Jor-El. I'm your father. Even though you've been raised as a human being, you are not one of them. You have great powers, only some of which you have discovered.
If man gets older and he thinks very differently, and things get very clear. And there's one thing I do know, son, and that is you are here for a reason.
I want to get a gauge. I want to get a temperature reading on how we feel about Superman as a character. Brian, if it's okay, I'd like to start with you. Give me your personal feelings about the Soupsman, the Uberman.
So, well, that's an interesting word for it. But honestly,
German.
I didn't have I'm familiar. I didn't really have too much of a familiarity with Superman until the last 5-10 years or so, as the newest movies had come out. I had never seen this movie previously, either the original or the sequels, and yeah, it was never a character that I was particularly drawn to, honestly. Even growing up in middle school, having read a few comics here and there, I tended towards the Spider-Man, Batman, more so on the Batman side with DC, but largely reading Marvel stuff just tangentially here and there. And only in the last year have I started reading any of Superman stuff. And this was kind of my first deep dive, and I'm definitely excited to talk about it because I feel like it was a bit of a blind spot, but something that I probably wouldn't have appreciated when I was younger anyway. So I feel like it always catches up to me eventually.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the Superman? You're our token. This is your choice, by the way. This is Chris's pick to start.
It
off
was
the
my
new
choice.
year.
I mean, if it's its 40th anniversary, so I feel like it was worth
I think
discussing.
it's a great choice. So you're a resident superhero expert. It's a title that I'm giving you right now that you must live up to and know all the questions I have for you.
I'll try my best.
Can you go into the sun? Can he be in the sun?
Yes, 100%. Dude, the sun is what gives him his powers.
Okay, just quick check. Okay, you are a resident superhero expert.
He can charge himself off of the sun's rays. So, growing up, I knew about Superman. I knew a little bit of Superman lore, but like Brian, I always gravitated more toward Batman in the DC universe, with like a little bit of Marvel sprinkled in, like Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Batman were really like the go-to as a kid. The challenge with Superman is Superman's a character that always kind of parallels that savior, a kind of Jesus Christ mythos. You know, this superhuman character or savior character that humanity is supposed to look up to, not necessarily supposed to strive to become, right? So that's why I always kind of gravitated more toward Batman as a character, because he's a human. Granted, he's a billionaire, but it always seemed more attainable, the things that Batman could do. Superman was more of like something, a superpower floating above us, something that was meant to fly in, save us, and then fly away. Like, you could never aspire to be him. So I really didn't start gravitating towards Superman and appreciating what he brings to modern mythology until I was an adult, like Brian.
I always thought Superman was super dumb. I think my problem with him was constantly, he's way too overpowered. Nothing's really challenging with him, and there's this glowing green rock that makes him useless. I was like, how boring of a character. What I've learned as I've grown up and going through watching the DCU and what they were trying to go, what they've been doing in the DCU and what they've been trying to go for, not really liking Superman Returns, revisiting this Donner film, is I've grown to appreciate how hard it is to write Superman, because I do believe it is a very challenging thing to do when you create something that is something so invincible that has like one defect, right? But what I've grown to appreciate is the skill and ability it takes, and when things are going right in this film or in the DCU, is appreciating how you can bring that to life and make that an interesting concept. And this idea of something completely pure and powerful that is a symbol of hope and justice that you can look up to, or in the later films, as he's appreciated as power that we're debating on how to control or how to manage or how to deal with. So I think it brings up and he's just like in the savior analog that you're describing, he is a human, so he's not just a weapon or a MacGuffin. He is a person that with agency. That makes it interesting.
In later years, they definitely tended to lean on the alien aspect of the character more. That's kind of what you're getting at.
And I think that aligns with our understanding of myth. Whereas if you look at the turn since the 50s, we've been growing more and more, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Thor tried to make it like a science magic.
Right.
And that is kind of like, well, we can convince, and all movies are trying to do are convince you of reality. Genre films are trying to extend kind of believability into the supernatural or super high science fiction fantasy realm. And so I think they've tried to analyze it and go, no, you can believe this because it's science. And I think you see that shift in public consciousness, and that's why they tackle it from that angle recently. I have no problem with either. I think the latter, or the primary, what they've gone for with this one is like more myth, with the Donner fic we'll be talking about, but still very, very powerful. And I still think the structure is the same, and something that we'll talk about. So in talking about this, Superman has had many different forms. What do we think of the different? We were hitting on it a little bit earlier. What do we think of the different forms of how Superman's come to be? What are our preferences? How do we prefer? What's the most interesting version of this character to you guys? We'll start with you, Chris.
Well, like you're mentioning, at least in Hollywood, Superman's been portrayed in a couple of different ways, whether it's Christopher Reeves' Superman, or I kind of tend to lump Christopher Reeves and Brandon Routh into the same Superman category, because Superman Returns is supposed to be like an homage or a spiritual successor to Superman 2. So they're essentially supposed to be, he's taking over for Christopher Reeves. But when you go into the Henry Cavill films, like we just talked about, they're trying to go with like a grittier, darker tone for those movies. They still tackle kind of some of the same beats, some of them in different ways, some of them in the same ways. But when Man of Steel first came out, I was like, this Henry Cavill's a great Superman. I'm enjoying this kind of gritty rendition of this character, this more realistic rendition of this character. But now that we've kind of went back and watched Superman the movie from 1978, this will be like the probably the third or fourth time I've seen it. I think I appreciate this movie way more than Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman, solely because I found myself becoming more hopeful after watching this movie, or wanting to be a better person after watching this movie. With Cavill, I don't feel that way. Like I don't know what it is. It's probably just the tone of that film, but like I don't feel hopeful after watching that movie. I don't feel like humanity is good by nature. If you're understanding what I'm saying. What about you, Brian?
I think I pretty much completely agree with what you're saying there. I think in the Donner version, he's personified in a way that really allows you to relate to him, even though you know he's this ridiculously extreme. He is an alien, he's from another planet, but he's got such a human element to him. And I think something that this does really well, and I haven't seen the other the more recent stuff since they came out. Really, I haven't revisited the Routh or the Cavill Supermans, which I think I tend to enjoy the DC stuff more than most people, so I enjoyed those movies. I think some of the stuff they suffer from, this movie doesn't suffer from. It seems very straightforward in ways that those movies just aren't. And I think it does a really good job of telling the origin story, but not lingering on it too long, and showing 3 phases of his life, which I think most of the origin story movies do, but they do it in such a way as to really make it so it's like, okay, we all relate to his struggles. Even though he is this extraordinary person, he's very relatable, and he has human choice, as we come to see throughout the movie, even though he may be on a higher level of awareness than most humans are.
He still struggles with human problems. Maybe not in the same way that like Peter Parker struggles with human problems, but you can see that they're still there, and that makes him still a relatable character at times.
What I was hitting at earlier, Superman has had trouble being interesting in some contexts because you really can't do more than the fastest, most impervious, strongest thing. It's hard to give that an antagonist. And I think that's what struggled to make his story interesting. And when they're making it interesting, it is this idea of, and it's something said in this film that we're covering, which is there are some things he just can't stop. Turns out he can change time, so that's pretty.
In this instance, yeah.
Pretty powerful.
Although he's forbidden to.
Although he's forbidden. But you see, I think something laid that's the groundwork that's laid really well in this film is that he has all of galactic knowledge and human evolution and history and all that, and that's something that he learned, and that's something that he's understood. So he's kind of a student of us mortals, and that puts him in a also higher power with knowledge. And I think that was really important to set clear, which isn't super clear in the later iterations of him. Chris, do you have any insight into how the comics have dealt with him over the years? Just like a general overview of like what his persona is and what they've leaned towards.
I would say, I mean, his persona is pretty similar to the way this movie depicts him, the way Dick Donner chose to portray him in this film. Like he taking kind of like a 5-year humanities and philosophy course from his dead father. Like I don't know if that's exactly how DC has always portrayed him, but Superman has always been portrayed as a character who is deeply understanding of the human condition and the human race and our history and our sciences. At one point, he even comes up with the cure for cancer. Like he's not by any means a stupid individual. He's very intelligent. So I if that's what you were getting at, it seems to be pretty
Consistent.
Uniform. Yeah, exactly. Consistent, uniform with the way DC Comics has portrayed him over the course of all this time.
I guess the DCU just has the most different approach. And I wouldn't say that it's a bad approach. It's taking a character and trying to do something interesting with it. And I think is a reflection. I found what Zack Snyder was trying to do with Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman was this kind of grim, nihilistic reflection of society and American idealism. That I don't know if you did, you do it similar to the way that Captain America has been done, where he has doubts about things from what he's been through the series of movies in the MCU. But he still kind of has this tried and true justice. And at one point in this Donner film, he goes, I stand for the American way. He's like straight
Truth,
up.
justice, and the American way. And he says it with such conviction, too, you know?
Right. And he's a person that believes in American idealism and wants to stand behind that, which is very interesting. But I think both are interesting. I think whether or not one was executed better than the other is up to public debate, and I think that debate is largely monopolized by those who think that it has been done poorly in the later years. But I think the idea of a god alien child and having to deal with his ramifications on Earth is interesting in both takes, and could coexist, I think, in the same story, which I think would be super interesting. Which I know is something that, like, I've been playing through the Injustice game, and that's something that they've kind of wrestled with. They kind of went full force where Superman started his own regime. This is literally called the regime, where it's like Lois Lane dies in the Injustice universe, which is like a video game series with like Mortal Kombat style fighting. And Superman is kind of on this side of like world order and complete order, and trying to remove the chaos from life, and giving people less free will in the pursuit of order. And Batman is the one who comes up against him, saying no, which is really interesting.
He's like a cult tyrant.
Pretty much, yeah. He basically goes, villains don't deserve to live, and Batman has to go like, hey, we're no better than them, and that classic age-old conflict of justice.
Right. He essentially crosses that line that most of the time Batman's unwilling to cross, which is, if we just kill all these people the first time we encounter them, nothing bad will ever happen again.
And then later DCU, they try to do that kind of with Batman at the helm of crossing the line.
Yeah.
But Superman also being depressed, which is, something we can weigh against. Like we'll be comparing, Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman. Injustice is a whole nother, or not Injustice, but Justice League. I think it feels like it was made by a different studio. So it doesn't even feel like the same Superman that's in that. But I think overall it is nice to see, watching these films, it is such a positive message, and that is something that we are drought with. As much as like dark, gritty nihilism, it is nice to have a hero who's just like, I'm just trying to do the right thing, and
it makes you feel good on the inside, right?
I can see through your clothes, but only if you ask me to.
Right. He's a gentleman.
He's a gentleman. Very cool. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we are going to dive into the actual creation of the film, and what we think of how the film's put together, and our thoughts on the Richard Donner and its influence going forward. But we'll be right back with Pop-O-Holics. And we're back.
Hello.
So, Chris. Hello. Chris, I hear you have some interesting things about how this movie was put together. I was reading some stuff on Wikipedia. Seemed like a clusterfuck.
Yeah, there were a lot of people involved, but it really is like a dream team of creators when you look at some of the names that were involved in the making of this movie. It was directed by Richard Donner, who's a fantastic director. He directed The Omen, The Goonies, Lethal Weapon, Scrooged, a lot of great movies. It was scored by John Williams.
Oh, let's talk about that score.
Do
for
I have
a second.
to say about that?
This movie's good because of the score. Score connects
incredible.
Things in this movie that aren't super weighty, and connects them all iconically, and I had several moments of like, this scene doesn't work without the score. And John Williams' classic fashion of rearranging the theme in such interesting ways early on when Clark is doing things like heroically on a small scale. He uses the wind section for the latter half of the main theme, and uses lower horns, and it really is not as thick and powerful as when it really kind of goes full force, and it's just it's masterwork.
I was just telling Brian, every time I hear this score, or at least every time I hear the Superman theme, I get really pumped up. Like, no joke, goosebumps every single time. It's such a good theme. It's one of the iconic Hollywood themes. Granted, John Williams has created a ton of iconic Hollywood themes, but it's a great score.
Yeah, I was just saying too, I had never seen this movie, but immediately recognized the theme from, I don't know if it was later Superman shows or the movies, but it immediately hit me. And even stuff as simple as Luthor and his henchmen, the music they would use there is just like perfectly silly, like boom, 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 very
cartoony.
Yeah, super cartoony, and that was something, we'll get into it, but I really like how this movie doesn't take itself too seriously, and I guess that is the main contrast with some of what's happened in the more recent iterations. But the level of lightness to this movie made the whole thing really enjoyable for me, and the score is clearly hugely important in that.
Yes, and still sounds like a John Williams score, but being unique, especially the latter half of the main motif. The da 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 da. It's like straight Star Wars.
I know. I keep confusing the two.
Well, I mean, it came out a year after Star Wars came out.
He had Star Wars on the dome.
Yeah.
Star people.
But whenever I hear this theme, I always kind of lump it together with Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Like, there are similar beats and similar motifs in all three of those films, I think. But all three are fantastic scores.
So I know that this film came together and was way over budget, and they were going to film both Superman and Superman 2 all at once. So from what I understand is they got a couple different production houses together. They were trying to find Superman. They went through pretty much every big actor you can think of during the 70s. Dustin Hoffman, James Caan, oh my God, John Voight. They went through so many actors trying to see, and they eventually settled on Christopher Reeve for it. And like I was saying before, they were trying to do both at one time. Donner kept going over budget. They decided they'd filmed 75% of Superman 2. But by the time they had gone, well, if this movie bombs, we're already over budget here. We won't finish production on that film. And what's crazy is that I believe it made $300 million at the box office, which is just huge, with a budget of $55 million. And
that's a lot for that time period.
It was supposedly going to be one of the most expensive films of all time. It was in production. It was like, this is the most expensive movie ever made. And you see why when you see the special effects in comparison to other movies and what they were doing and how they were trying to break ground. Very similar to Star Wars. But what's crazy is Christopher Reeves was paid $200,000 for his role in Superman.
Wow.
And Marlon Brando, after all said and done, of his 11.8% take or something like that, it was over 11% in domestic gross box office. Took home
6 minutes on screen.
Yeah, oh my God! Reading about what Marlon Brando deems his own podcast feature on Marlon Brando in this movie. We'll talk about that a little bit.
Krypton.
But yeah, oh God, he made considerably more. He made tens of millions of dollars. I think $22 million or something crazy. He could have retired on what he made from his performance.
That was a good contract for him.
Did you guys read a bit anything about Brando's role in doing Superman?
I didn't read up on any of the background of what his opinion was of it, but watching the film, I always assumed that it was a paycheck.
Well, I did.
Thanks.
No
I'm excited to hear about it.
Backed guy.
So Marlon Brando did not, from all reports of his decisions, I don't know if there's any quotes directly saying he was like, this is a cash-in, or I'm going to phone this in. But based on reports of what his contract laid out, you could assume that he had ill will towards this film doing well or being any piece of art.
Right. Well, I mean, he was wearing like an aluminum foil jumpsuit in every single one of his scenes.
He demanded
he
that
rocked it though.
He did, yeah.
Well, he's like one of the greatest actors of all time.
It's true.
Well, let me give you some backstory. His contract demanded that he be done with principal photography and all filming of himself, I believe, within 3 days. So they had to capture everything he did in 3 days. He had argued, he had agreed to do the film, but argued that he should be represented by a bagel or a green suitcase instead of his actual persona, and he would voice over everything.
Wait, that's not real.
Cited and referenced in
by a bagel?
I want to know where you got that information.
And it is referenced. I didn't dive too deep into that. He said that he was not going to be under contract to memorize his lines, and the production house had to have cue cards on set for him to read during his performances.
No wonder he mispronounces things.
Yeah,
it was his
he's
first
reading
time
them off
reading it.
cue cards.
Off of cue cards. It's like an SNL sketch.
And he had demanded a salary. So you can imagine that he was paid the most out of his first build in this movie. That is Marlon Brando, one of the finest actors of our generation's contribution. But despite all of that, he's not bad in the movie. And as you pointed to earlier, he just pronounces Krypton real weird.
Multiple times.
The planet Krypton.
I guarantee
like,
at least one time Richard Donner was probably like, Mr. Brando, it's actually pronounced Krypton. And he's like, it's not what it looks like on the cue cards.
Do you want to argue this until my 3 days are up?
Yeah. I can either shoot the scenes or we can argue about this for the next 3 days.
Anything else you learned about the making of that was fascinating to you, Chris?
Dude, Jeffrey Unsworth was the cinematographer, and he was also the cinematographer for a film we discussed in our first episode, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
This was his last film.
Was this his last film?
I believe he passed away
That's
during
a shame.
the post-production of this.
But, as I was watching that, having known that Jeffrey Unsworth was the cinematographer, I could see some creative parallels between 2001: A Space Odyssey and this movie.
Oh, for sure.
They do take the visual effects team, which was nominated for a special consideration because they didn't have the award at the time of the Oscars. It did a bunch of different cool, innovative stuff to make what happened. And there was, there's parts of the way they shot things that I really wish were incorporated more into film nowadays, that you watch a lot of these scenes and you're like, now that would just be CG, and in certain cases it would be more interesting. But a couple things that I noted: his weightlessness and his effortlessness going through flying and kind of moving around, being suspended, but it's more or less like him flying in the picture, but I believe it's done with wires. There's a certain elegance to the restraint that Superman has in how he moves around the world that is very engaging on a human level. Another one is when he's flying with Lois Lane or flying in general, and mostly with Lois Lane because it's a human interaction, but there's facial expressions and them looking at each other, and if you just were to CGI that flying, you couldn't dive into that unless you had someone like Andy Serkis or a mocap team, and even then you're getting into Uncanny Valley territory with trying to make CG people look real. And this has a lot of beautiful moments that you just don't see achieved nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the tagline for this movie on all the posters was, "You'll believe a man can fly." So if they were going to deliver on anything, they wanted to deliver on making sure that Superman's flying at least looked excellent.
Yeah, man, I agree. I think they nailed it for the most part, especially at the time. And even with some of the bigger shots where you have the clearly him injected over backdrops, the way they could hide the missile behind the mountain as he's flying and show that perception of depth there. I thought it worked really well, and for the most part didn't like take me out of the movie too much, which would be kind of expected for something that far back. And the use of miniatures in this too. Like, I know, I'm sure it was inspired by Star Wars to a large degree, but all of that stuff, even when I could tell it was kind of miniatures, I was like, okay, this I can still I could still stay in it for the most part, and it looked beautiful, especially some of the Arctic scenes. I don't want to get ahead of myself. As we're talking about production, something that I don't know if you guys listened to the interview I had sent with Richard Donner for the 40th anniversary. Yeah, he had mentioned that his partner Tom Mankiewicz, they didn't want to give him credit for, I don't know if it was like executive producer or whatnot.
Yeah, the studio didn't want to.
Right, so he essentially, Donner made up the term creative consultant and credited him with it at the end of the credits so that he could be be noted there. And I guess it's something that's kind of been picked up and used since then. But I just thought that was kind of interesting, like a director shoehoorning in his helpers.
He essentially helped to rewrite the script that Donner had gotten, and he was kind of like, well, I believe the script that they initially got to shoot both films was over 500 pages long, which for if you do not know what a page represents in screenplays, it's about a minute of on-screen time. So even for two films, that's 2.5 hours each of filming to shoot. And he was, how do you pronounce his name? Mankiewicz?
I'm not sure. I think, Mankiewicz.
Mankiewicz Foundation. Mankiewicz was brought in to help really get a more clear path and a more direct screenplay involved. So hugely.
And the screenwriter, this was the same guy who wrote The Godfather?
He wrote the novel, Mario Puzo. Or at least he was one of the screenwriters. So he wrote the novel, the Godfather novels that the movie was based on.
So I guess that could have been the Brando connection potentially. I don't know if...
Possibly.
Yeah, well, it looked like they were trying to make, from all the research that I did, that this was trying to be a big studio hit. You know, they were saying this could be the next big blockbuster, the next thing to follow. Star Wars was, a year before?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if they were trying to compete with that, but it's kind of the same idea of, like, this could be a big property. It was a very popular comic. And something they wanted to bring to life. So they were trying to throw all kinds of money and get all kinds of stars based on what you saw with what I had mentioned earlier, who they were looking for to play as Superman. And in Superman, we get Christopher Reeves' performance. I'm always thrown back. This is the third time I've seen this film. I haven't seen it in a couple of years. But always when you're in teenage Clark territory, I'm always like, that dude looks weird. And I'm like, I can't remember that this dude, I was like, I like the performance, and I forget that that's not Christopher Reeves for a second.
Right.
That was at least my experience. And I was going like, there's no way this dude carries the movie. This putz.
Yeah, they had 3 separate actors portray him in the film. He had the baby Clark, and then the teen Clark, and then Christopher Reeves is the adult Clark.
But man, once Christopher Reeves shows up on film, he really carries a lot of the emotional weight, a lot of believability behind what Superman, aka Clark Kent, is trying to do in the world. Like a lot of humility, a lot of genuine empathy for human. I mean, there's a lot he's doing in his performance.
Oh yeah, I love the way just all the nuance and differences that he puts into both characters of Clark Kent and Superman, like hunching his back a little bit, or maybe walking a little more clumsily, or he does such a good job making sure that there's a clear delineation between those two personas. I personally believe that he's definitely the best actor who's ever portrayed Superman, but I don't know what you guys think.
I totally agree that he does a great job of distinguishing, because he even does a thing where at one point he's thinking about telling Lois who he is, and he's got his glasses off and he starts speaking in his like lower voice, and then he's like, oh no, questions it, and then brings it up a register or something, and then gets back to that Clark Kent voice. I think he sells it very well, and it's not something that's nearly to the what could be considered silly level of like a Christian Bale Batman, which makes on its face a little more sense that you'd have to really mix it up, especially when you just have glasses on to cover your face. But I think the way he carries himself, like you were saying, but I will say that before we get into Reeves stuff in general, the first two that play him, I think there's some just iconic moments, like when baby Superman lifts the car up.
Oh, yeah.
And just like look what I'm doing, like on his face. And when he's a teenager, him running alongside that train. There's a level of joy in that where I'm just like, okay, this is wonderful. It's
not to
exactly
say
what I'm looking for.
He's having fun that he can cut loose a little bit.
Teenage
Right.
Clark Kent doesn't sell me on what's happening. It's just, I believe they use some prosthetics
Reeve does
to make
carry
him
it,
look
for sure.
like Christopher Reeve, and he ends up looking like an undead nightmare.
To put it nicely.
Weird, why are your eyes below your eye sockets type of thing happening. I think the performance is fine, but they overdubbed his voice with Christopher Reeves. Which is also he
Did
didn't
they
know
really?
about that. They did.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't even notice that. Oh my gosh.
I thought it was weird. This is a side note, but as baby Clark is hurling through space, his dad is teaching him about human history, and
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a weird osmosis, I think. Like
that was very strange. I'm just gonna point out how weird that, how much that threw me off of him trying to be like, now Clark, when you're eating dinner with humans, there is usually a salad fork and a regular fork for your main course, and him being like, what? Okay.
he was planting the seeds, dude. The seeds of knowledge. He's probably going to go over all of that again.
Well, he gives him the birds
and
and
we
the
see
bees
it. We
too.
see it.
Yeah, we
happen
do.
Again.
He gives him the birds and the bees.
Yeah.
Now, Clark.
Now, Clark, when a
When
man
a space
loves a woman,
alien loves a humanoid woman, got to remember that they're a delicate creature. Not only for the fact that they're a woman, but also because you're a super powerful alien with a dense molecular structure.
right?
But I to go back to the original point, I think Christopher Reeves is absolutely perfect as his role as Clark Kent Superman for all the reasons that you guys said. His whole body, his slouching, he slouches, he raises the pitch of his voice. It almost when I was growing up, I'd always go, "What a dumb disguise." He's obviously Superman, but I think the idea is that he sells his himself so well as Clark Kent that even though he looks just like the characters even mention it, it's like that could never be.
There's no way.
They're totally two different people, which I think makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, I think, and I won't dive too deeply into this right now, but I think it does kind of lend itself in a fun way to people not necessarily believing what they see or what they know to be true, and you kind of got to come up with another story. Like, oh, it couldn't just be this regular guy. It's got to be something much more incredible than that.
I think there was a lot of stuff in this film. I know what you're hinting at, of people's perception, which was really interesting, which we might talk about. Cool. Any other notes on how this film was built? The players in it. Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman is Lex Luthor. We can't not talk about Gene Hackman. He's fantastic.
He's got the dumbest superhero plot that's ever existed. I don't.
It's all about real estate, dude.
It's brilliant.
Dude, he's incredible. His dialogue isn't particularly thoughtful or that intriguing or that dense, but man, he makes all of it work.
Yeah. He comes off as intelligent, which is what Lex Luthor is supposed to be. So,
but man,
and I also like
dude.
that. I'd be interested to know, like, wait, what'd you say?
I said, get yourself some better company. I mean, this whole film, the allegory to me was like, you are who your friends are. Like, you could be the smartest dude in the world, but if you got two nincompoops, none of your plans are going to come together.
Well, I mean, for Lex Luthor, I don't think it's about. He knows his plans are going to come together because he's him. He's him. You know, like it's more of a superiority complex where he wants to be surrounded by people that make him feel superior. So
I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the lessons I learned for watching it.
Right.
The
Well,
lesson that he does not learn himself.
Also, I'm as far as like his classic look goes, and I know this is a bit of a digression. I would be interested to know what Gene Hackman's contract looked like, because we don't see him as a bald man until the very end of the film. He's wearing a wig or has hair the entire movie until the very end when Superman pulls off his wig. So I wonder if he was like, look, man, I know what Lex Luthor looks like, and I want hair for 95% of this movie.
I thought I thought that was a really cool thing because it's something that kind of throws you off. If you notice, there's, when he's in the library, he has gray streaks. It's almost matching what he's doing in the moment. It's kind of an extension of him trying to build a bigger facade for himself based on what his hair is. So I thought it was actually really interesting. I think it worked, but
I think it works as well. But I'd be interested to know, what took place behind the scenes, and if that was like a story choice, or if that was something that Gene Hackman requested.
Yeah,
I think it played well too. Like there's some like silly slapstick stuff where the one of his henchmen finds one of his wigs on the bed or something. He's just like, oh, what is this?
Yeah,
But I think and I hadn't thought of it until now, but I think it may play into this idea of even Luthor being this very well-known magnate of sorts. He still has to blend in, and to do his nefarious deeds, he has to put on a costume in a way that Superman does to do his good deeds.
Yeah.
And I actually watched this movie twice in preparation, and I had to recognize that Luthor, when he crashes the car with like a remote control device at some point, I didn't even recognize Hackman because he had like a blonde wig on. So I wasn't even 100% sure that was Luthor until the second time watching. So it was a little interesting in that regard. Just sacrificing character recognition for this hair. So it would be cool to see what drove that.
And then we have the final lead, the glue. I think part of what holds this film together is Margot.
Ned Beatty, right? As Otis.
Yes, of course.
No,
Margot Kidder.
Margot Kidder as the Lois Lane. I think you are no Superman without a good Lois Lane. And I really like the angle they went with. She's kind of your regular go-getter woman in the 70s, and kind of this point of a woman going at stereotypes. I think it plays really interesting against what the traditional values that Superman may hold. It's a really interesting catalyst to their relationship as her personality. What do you guys think of her performance and her character?
I thought she was fantastic. I mean, right off the bat, in several of the interviews that I've listened to with Dick Donner talking about the casting of Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder, like he knew that she was going to be Lois Lane from the second she walked into the room, and the chemistry that those two had together. Am I misremembering here? Did he say that she tripped into the audition?
And just fell flat on her face,
right?
And then he was sold, yeah.
Yeah. But he was like, you are going to be Lois Lane. But I think she's fantastic in this film. And the dichotomy between the two characters and their chemistry, both romantic and otherwise, is phenomenal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought she did a great job. I was a little confused as to why she can't spell, being a reporter. But
that's like a weird character choice.
Yeah, it just apparently needs the dudes as copy editors. But she is a great journalist still, so it's fair enough.
I think it's a great gag because all the words she's asking for a spell check on are like awful like massacre, I think, is one of the words.
Massacre,
like they're all
rapist.
Very yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Very
That's
funny.
True. And she has like an offhanded remark about, remember that expose I did about that sex and drugs orgy at the old folks home or something? It's like, this story's got everything you need. Some of her comic bits were incredible.
And then she has the line that she syncs up with the editor of the Daily Planet, which is like, you don't make this the story doesn't make you, you make the story or something.
Make the story great or something like that.
Yeah. There's a play on that, which is kind of like to what you were saying before. Like, no, that story writes itself. Just report on whatever that is. That's interesting copy right there. I think she's kind of like she's kind of got this, like, she smokes, and she really, really wants that Superman dick, like off the bat. Like,
oh yeah,
it's hilarious when they're at the dinner table together, and she like wants to ask him if he's capable, but she just ends, "Can you eat?"
Yeah, exactly. I do eat.
Can you eat my?
I do eat
dinner if I make you a dinner. I thought it was great showing her in the role of Desire, which is something, especially in the 70s, you didn't really, it was always like, men that were like, oh, look at that girl, where Superman's kind of is aware, but he's also a little,
he's playing along in that scene. He's definitely like, he's flirtatious, but he's not as aggressive as she is.
Right. And she's super aggressive, it was still to this day, it's just something you don't see a lot from like a girl who's like, obviously like, oh, I know what I want that guy.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, and it makes interesting interplay between them. But she still like likes Clark, which is nice. She's still like, oh, Clark's such a nice guy, and he's like attainable.
But she has like no romantic interest in Clark. A
lot of great talent went in, like you had said before. A lot of great talent that went into making this. So it is not surprising that the end product is iconic and stands the test of time. Something I wanted to talk about was how this movie, just as far as nitty gritty plot details and genre, I think that it doesn't age super well because a lot of the science in this movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and the situations that it gets in are a little weird and not as cinematically action packed as something like Star Wars, I would say.
Right.
So the action.
Are we talking about the final act?
That final act is
the elephant in the room.
Definitely a big part of it. Not to hurt this film's. I'm not trying to say too much negative about how the film was shot. I still think for the day, it's pretty incredible what they accomplished. And but what I want to point out more so is the actual structure of the film and how. We get a very Christ-like narrative with Superman's development into who he becomes, into Superman, and all the trials and tribulations, the foils to Superman. I think they're perfect, and I think they're a perfect outline if you were to start writing a superhero or someone of great power potential, starting with this as a base outline and how the team handled writing this and shooting it and the structure in which they made it. I think it's pretty perfect, the way that they outlined everything. What do you guys think about that?
No, I agree. I mean, it's definitely. I don't want to use the word standard because I feel like that doesn't give it enough credit. But we were talking about the monomyth earlier, and it's definitely one of the best ways to tell a story like this one, right? Like there's a template, this ancient template that humanity kind of uses to tell stories, like monomyth, the hero journey, whatever you want to call it. But when I was watching this movie this time around, I was thinking about Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 and how similar both of those movies are to the first two Superman movies. And I did a little bit of digging to see if maybe Sam Raimi actually did pull some inspiration from these two movies, and he claims he didn't. He claims it all came directly from the comic books. But I mean, there's undeniable similarities between these four movies. And even in the past, Christian, when we've talked about Spider-Man 2, I've mentioned how I always lump that movie in particular with Superman 1 and Superman 2. They have the same feeling behind them, if you can kind of understand what I'm saying. So it's just a story structure that's going to live on eternally as long as humans are around.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I feel like they lean into the kind of Christ imagery that you were talking about, Christian. Jor-El, Superman's father, which I don't want to dig too deep here, but Jor-El is like kind of like the Yahweh equivalent, whereas Kal-El is like the Christ equivalent. And he even says, like, I gave them my one and only son, Yep. And it's like this explicit, like, sacrificial motif that's being driven home there. And I think it's beautiful. I think the pacing up to that point, the pacing of this movie feels really well done for me. And I don't want to constantly compare it with the later ones, but even with something like Spider-Man, you have that period of him kind of, even though he knows he's special, Peter Parker's more of an intelligence versus super strength. Clark Kent is very much like this basic person who lived in this Smallville, it's kind of aptly named, this middle of nowhere country bumpkin type thing. And only when he discovers his heritage of sorts, when he finds is it just a crystal that creates the Fortress of Solitude?
Yeah.
Okay, so he finds the crystal and is introduced to this, you're a wizard, Harry moment, the classic beginning of his journey. And something that I don't know if you guys made this connection at all, but I had never thought about the Fortress of Solitude as a supercomputer itself, and the fact that it's in the Arctic. I'll get into it a little later with this type of, I think with comics and comic book movies, they tend to foreshadow things to come, even if they're not consciously doing it. But the idea of a supercomputer makes sense that it would be in the Arctic because of the states that they have to hold, the quantum computations in these superpositions. You have to be essentially near zero. So it probably wasn't conscious at all, but just the idea of
that's a really interesting take.
As a supercomputer was super interesting to me.
That's so awesome. I've never thought about it like that, but you're dead on.
Yeah, I think that's a super crazy point. I never considered, but it is really cool. I always thought it was more of like isolation,
Well, it's definitely that too.
That plays a role too, but I think Brian's saying that like he said that it's like foreshadowing, like things to come.
Yeah.
So.
I think, the Christ imagery is so strong. I think even if you look at the structure, and this is my Christian religious background coming into play here, of the life of Jesus Christ, when you look at the Gospels, his life had a very important birth. It had a brief moment in young childhood, and then a 10, 15-year gap.
Yeah.
So this idea of the origins, where did you come from, what is your history, what lineage, what family lineage are you coming from, a miraculous birth or come to be in our world. Come to be in our world, which is him traveling through space. Him coming to grips as a young man with his identity and his earthly parents and what they stand for and what they care about, and humanizing and growing up just like a human, and showing us that he is in fact had a human childhood. And then this gap of 10 years of what happened in those 10 years that made him just this path of discovery and learning and soul searching and understanding. I think it was really interesting to see them have this gap, which you don't see a lot in a lot of superhero movies, where they're just like, okay, and then 10 years later, and I think to the Zack Snyderverse Superman, he kind of has a similar thing, and they kind of talk about what brought him to his discovery and the moments in his life. But I thought that was really cool and really, really potent and powerful, that he is, in fact, you see him briefly as a baby, and then as a teenager, and then most of the movie, after about 40 minutes, I believe, is now he's an adult. Like, he's a full-fledged adult. He's out of adolescence. He knows who he wants to be. He doesn't really change at all after that point. He's a steady pulse of a character from that point on.
A source for good.
A source for good and understanding. And it made me go like, oh man, wonder what those first days were like. But then I'm like, oh, I could watch Smallville. That was a show. It had 20
It was a
seasons.
show.
So, Chris, you had mentioned, Chris or Christian, you talked about the cinematographer working on 2001.
Yeah.
I feel like, and this is something I only caught the second time too. So when he first goes to the Fortress of Solitude, it goes into this scene that's very similar in a lot of ways to the end of 2001 when they go through the Stargate. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's implied that he's just in the fortress for 12 years before
That's what I got too, yeah.
Okay,
He's basically
just... that's what you were saying, Christian. I don't know if...
I thought he left planet Earth.
No. So
I don't know, yeah.
My takeaway, I mean, that's a possibility. It depends on how they're looking to illustrate time, like the passage of time. My takeaway is he just decided to live in the Fortress of Solitude for those 5 to 10 years, studying under Jor-El, basically, to get caught up on both Kryptonian history and knowledge and human history and knowledge.
Yeah, definitely possible. I got the feeling, like you were saying, they may have just done the universe and galaxy supercut of images, but I got it. I honestly took it as he's in the fortress, but then he's flying to other systems and meeting those people and trying to understand. Like,
Could
the
have
idea
potentially
is
been
that
like
he
a
goes-
hologram.
Like, he goes all
true, too.
around the universe, or at least
Yeah.
study. I mean, I think the point could be that he studies all these other civilizations, and then has to come to the determination that American democracy is the best form of species civilization that currently exists, at least on the planet Earth, and he's going to stand behind it.
I don't know if it was that on the nose, to be fair.
Maybe it was more like my adoptive parents live here and I love them, so I'm going to protect this planet.
What do you guys think about the way that he comes to like understand that he's going to go on this journey and become Superman? Jor-El strictly says you can't change the course of human history,
Right.
but his involvement in any way is technically shaping the course of human history. And they play it up at the end like he's disobeying in that final moment.
Right,
But
literally
in-
changing the course of human history by going back in time. All the times that I've seen this movie, I never necessarily thought of it in that way, where he's not allowed to live among them, because Jor-El specifically talks about him living among them. So just by being an active participant in Earth's society, he's going to shape our society in ways that it wouldn't have been shaped had he not appeared. What I think Jor-El is really talking about when he states that is exactly what Superman goes against at the end of the film, which is, I know you can do this, don't do this. Like, granted, it's completely ridiculous science flying around the Earth in the opposite direction of its
If you do this
rotation.
once, you may have to do it in the sequel as well.
Right, exactly. I believe the Richard Lester cut actually has a different ending, but I've never seen that
okay.
cut.
And
I've
I
only
think
seen the Donner cut.
that the original plan was this was supposed to be the ending to the sequel. Mm-hmm. This was going to be what, but he didn't know if the film would do well.
Yeah.
And how would you, with all the special effects they were doing at that time, be like, this
Right.
could be the laughing stock of my life.
But I definitely think back to the original point that Jor-El was explicitly stating, don't change human history in regards to the past, not necessarily
Really?
how you're going to affect the future.
I
That's just
guess.
my personal take, though. I mean, I didn't write the movie, so.
I just feel like if I was Jor-El, I'd be like, don't try to fly backwards to reverse the polarity and spinning of the Earth, because it'll stop all humans and have them fly off the Earth and spaghettify instantly, and you'll murder the entire human civilization if you think that that's going to work. And that's how time works.
And yet it didn't happen like that.
He's Superman.
Yeah.
I like this idea that they played off in the beginning of the film of him not being able to change certain things despite his power.
Right.
You know, I would like in new iterations or whatever to play on it a little more and to touch on it more, but I like the fact that the death of his father, his earthly father, is one that he can't stop. I mean, technically he can't stop.
By flying backwards in time. Hey, he can't go so far back to give Jonathan Kent a healthier heart. So.
I was wondering, at that point, it's like, yeah, how far back can you spin it? Just keep going and make everything right.
He should have went back a lot further. He knows where Lex Luthor was. Go get him and take him away, and then none of the earthquakes happen or anything. But even again, when he stops the Earth, he comes back and he just says hello to... This is what baffled me. He says hello to Lois and then flies
No
away.
sense.
It's like, that rock slide should still happen. Don't you have to
Yeah.
do all that shit that you did to prevent... Again, I don't know.
It was
so
almost
good.
implied that he stopped the second rocket when he went back, but we never saw it.
You do see
Right?
him fly around a bit more, but it's to re-engage the regular spinning of the
regular
Earth.
rotation,
I
yeah, to
guess
set time back on the
right.
correct course. There's definitely some chunks missing there. I would agree with you
There's
guys.
some logical chunks. All right,
Yeah.
we're gonna take a final break, and when we come back, we're gonna be talking about the influence of Superman, maybe some of our more particular thoughts on this, and how it fits into overall pop culture. We'll be back with more Pop-O-Holics. And we're back from the break talking about Donner's Superman. As always, please post on our Facebook, send us an email at popoholicscast@gmail.com, share your thoughts and feelings about this film. We want to hear from you. But we're going to take a second to share some of our specific feelings on this overall film. Chris, do you have anything you wanted to mention?
Yeah, just kind of getting back to what I mentioned earlier about how much this movie has influenced the future of the superhero genre. I talked a little bit earlier about how I think the first two Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, while Sam Raimi states that he was not influenced by this movie, there are just so many things that are similar to Superman 1 and 2 and Spider-Man 1 and 2. And without this film, we wouldn't have what we currently have today. Like, this film was the first movie that showed audiences that superhero source material can be translated to film in an effective way, right? So without this movie, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wouldn't exist. We would have never gotten those first Spider-Man movies. We would have never gotten X-Men, because the Hollywood system hadn't seen anything like this before. It really changed the game.
And it was a huge hit.
Yeah, and it was a huge success. So that also helps. Yeah, move things forward. I mean, there were 4 Superman movies before Superman Returns. So you have the first 2, which are pretty good, and then the next 2, which kind of suck. And then Superman Returns. So, I mean, they gradually got worse. But, that's bound to happen when the studio is just trying to crank something out to make a buck. Right?
Fair point.
Conversation for another day.
Sure. Continuing from that, just showing that you can, like you say, adapt a comic to the big screen. They actually, something we haven't talked about at the very beginning of this movie, it's actually a frame shot of the audience basically seeing a theater screen with someone reading a comic on screen, and then we eventually pan into that, which, or that might not be the term, pull into that.
Yeah.
Pull.
Yeah, we pull into the frame, and that was just something that, in my interest in comics recently, and like the Grant Morrison era, I feel like this is something where this breaking down of the fourth wall between what the comic is versus who the reader is, and how we control the story on some level in that regard. I thought it was very interesting to get you into this interesting mindset of you're watching something inside of a storybook, which right. I know you were texting us about how similar a lot of the stuff in this movie is to stuff we've done recently with Fargo, Buster Scruggs, very much adaptation-based in sorts. And I don't know, I thought it was kind of groundbreaking in that regard with some of the stuff with something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse recently, which I think does a lot of fun stuff playing with the fact that it's pulled from a comic book. But going back 40 years, it was like, wow, okay, they were really breaking boundaries even back then. It's
such an interesting idea for Richard Donner to be like, well, this is the first movie we're adapting from a comic book. Why don't we just, pull the camera into a comic book when we start the movie?
Right.
Yeah, I was confused when the movie started. I've been using the DCU. If you want to watch this movie, by the way, and maybe I'll preface it with this beginning of the episode, you can subscribe for free trials, at least on iOS, for 7 days to the DCU app.
DC Universe.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And so I started watching it. I thought the app was broken, or the app only played in like a 4x4. I was like, what is... I didn't remember that's how the movie started. And I was like, does it really have like a fake movie theater backdrop that I have to watch the film on? I was very confused for a good Momo before. I was like, oh yeah, this is how this movie does it. But I was constantly reminded about believability, and that was kind of always a mantra, that kind of something that definitely coded the entire viewing experience for me with watching this. And it was a believability in what artists try to do when they bring something fantastical to screen. And to your point, Brian, the idea of pulling the audience in that way was an idea of separating people from the fact that it was 100% trying to convince you of reality, and more of bringing you into a story and letting the audience go, it's okay if I suspend my belief. This is just a story.
Yeah.
And kind of giving them that grounding, that foundation to view the movie at, that lens to watch the movie through, which I think was hugely important. And then the movie itself deals with believing in Superman's existence and what he stands for, and then the special effects and how that's trying to make you believe that someone can fly, and that someone can do this, and that's actually happening, and to take you away with that, and how our constant pursuit of some of these more fantastical stories is doing that in the way we accomplish them. I mean, it was, watching this film, it was constantly reminding me of that pursuit and storytelling.
Yeah, so I completely agree, and I think overall this is just a super fun movie to watch. I can't say enough about Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. Just the silliness and the pettiness that he brings to criminality is so hilarious to me. Just he's almost jealous of Superman when Superman saves the plane. He's like, either it's real or someone else. Like, what does he say? I think I wrote it down here. He says, if any human being were to perpetuate such a fantastic hoax, it would have been me. It's like, it must have been real, because I would have done this if it wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
It's
yeah.
like, it's so freaking, so good. I don't know. And grounding it in such a seemingly silly but real thing about real estate and the lengths people will go to get valuable real estate, I just felt like it was a lot of fun. And this movie, it was working on all cylinders for what I'm looking for in superhero movies, and was kind of a nice refresher from where they've gone. Although I do love me some superhero movies, but yeah, I would highly recommend this one.
I completely agree with everything both of you guys just said.
Okay, so just to get into a couple more, like, I liked this moment. The concept behind Superman being able to hear on all these higher frequencies, and Luthor kind of using this ultra high wave frequency to communicate with him from across the world. I thought that was something where I'm sure it's been done in some of the later stuff, but it felt like, wow, okay, this is super. He says something like, there's only four-legged creatures and you that can hear this pitch.
Right.
So
he knew that Superman was the
to
only
me.
person that could hear that frequency,
Right.
which was genius. And I love I've always loved the dichotomy between Lex Luthor and Superman, because like you said, Brian, he's incredibly jealous and envious of what Superman has, and yet he doesn't want exactly what Superman has. He just wants to be superior to Superman. And up until that point, he felt like he was superior to everyone else. Right?
The only one at the top.
Right. And like I mentioned earlier, Superman's intelligent, but Lex Luthor is like super intelligence. He's super intelligence and a criminal mind all rolled into one against this unstoppable force. And that's why that the dynamic is always so interesting, because Lex Luthor has to concoct really elaborate and interesting schemes to make sure he can beat Superman, basically, because he can't beat him in fisticuffs. He can't beat him in a fist fight. So I've always enjoyed watching their interactions in this and other media.
Sure. And I think something that I really love about this movie, the way it leans into the mythic aspects, it kind of almost reminded me of concepts that were introduced a bit in the latest Star Wars iterations. The idea of you have this quote-unquote evil force that's rising up and gaining power, and then Superman appears out of nowhere, seemingly, and Luthor's even like, oh, the greatest criminal mastermind. He what else would he want besides the greatest good guy to fight against? So it's this recognition of like, okay, there's this inherent balance that Superman's got to come because he's the alternate to this evil force. And that kind of leads into something it's very out there. There's a book that I just read called An Unlikely Prophet, which is by Alvin Schwartz, who wrote Batman and Superman during the 40s and 50s. And I won't get into too much detail about the contents of the book because it's called a metaphysical memoir. So it's the kind of thing where you can read it and definitely think of it as fiction, in some sense, but he's presenting it as if it all actually happened to him. So you can take it with a grain of salt. But the conceit of this book is that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with American Gods. I know we've talked about Neil Gaiman in the past.
Yeah.
You've read that, Chris?
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with it and the television show.
Without getting into spoiler territory, there's this idea that Gaiman gets across in a lot of his work that when people worship something, whether it be one of the classic gods or something like TV, internet, highways, so on and so forth, there is a non-physical quality to this thing that when attention is paid to it, it grows in strength and recognition.
Right.
So in this story, this memoir, a person reaches out to Alvin Schwartz in his later age, I think when he's like 70 at this point, and is claiming to be really interested in a lecture that he gave about Superman, where he discussed how the writers were almost driven by the character rather than the other way around, and how they'd created this character. And what drove him to quit comics at the time was they wanted to have him do an issue. Well, it was a comic strip at this point, so they wanted to have him do a strip where Superman transferred his powers to Lois Lane. And that went against his idea of what Superman was, that he had built up over, 10, 20 years of writing him. And so throughout his life, he's looking back after having met this guy, and he introduces the idea of tulpas to him, which is a Buddhist concept of basically a being that's made of pure thought, that's created in the human mind, and can become real in some sense.
Interesting.
So this book is about how it's like you created this Superman character, and you never fully fleshed him out, and coming back to that and thinking about what his Superman was to him,
right,
and what those types of characters can be in reality, quote unquote. And so it was an incredible book that I would recommend for anyone who's interested in kind of like this esoteric side of what comic book heroes can be. I don't know what you guys feel about this. I know it's a bit out there, but
no, that's an awesome concept. Like, superheroes are what we make them to be and what their creators make them to be. Very interesting.
I thought Superman's underpants were a little too long. No, what was that book again, Brian? Just so we can repeat that.
It's called An Unlikely Prophet.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. It's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of this, which is the two major ways that Superman's been interpreted on film, and how you essentially take this concept and you can make it whatever you want it to be. If you want Superman to transfer his powers to Lois Lane, it's not necessarily a good or bad idea. It's all in the execution.
Sure.
And the idea that the spirit of these things can live on in different forms, I think, is important to creating really interesting stories, and trying to take a concept and expand it and to move it forward.
Right. It also ensures that these characters live on. If we're unwilling to write new stories and create new mythos for these characters, they're inevitably going to die off, just like Brian was talking about. If we stop talking about them or stop adding to the mythos, they'll disappear.
Yeah, and that's why I will fight against Superman got this rap, and even I follow some figures and critics that have this opinion, but I think it's a faulty one, which is that's not who Superman is. Or we saw this in The Last Jedi, with that's not who Luke Skywalker is, and the idea that you can't take a character or person and try to write it into a different way. I'm not saying that's always going to be successful, and we have these conversations. This podcast exists, critiques exist to have those conversations, but I don't think it should ever be that one thing is one way or another. It's what is this trying to tell us? How successful is it at being consistent with what it's trying to say?
Right.
And I think that's the problem you get in the DCU compared to this, which is pretty consistent through at least the first film to what I've seen, which is there's a lot of conflicting stuff in Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, where I see where they're I understand that character. I'm not mad that they're trying to do that. It's just it's a consistency problem from his mentors, from the decisions he makes. Don't fully flesh out into something that's as clean as what we get with the Donner film.
Yeah, Christian and I were talking the other night about how the Jonathan Kent in Richard Donner's film versus the Jonathan Kent in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel are so drastically different, and how the Zack Snyder Jonathan Kent really doesn't add anything to Superman becoming Superman. If anything, what he's trying to preach to Clark is almost the opposite of what Superman represents, where in the Richard Donner film, you actually have Jonathan Kent start with that same ideology as the Jonathan Kent in the Zack Snyder movie, saying, hey, you should hide yourself from the world. They're going to hate you. Like, just your mother and I love you. Just keep this under wraps, right? But right before he dies, he comes to the conclusion that Clark is here for a greater purpose. And he doesn't know exactly what that purpose is, but he knows that he needs to share his gifts with the world. So, and that's just a character arc that the Jonathan Kent in Zack Snyder's film was lacking, to the story's detriment, I think.
And I think more important for Clark's development is that he can't stop. Again, unless you take the end of this film, his strength and might and power can't stop the fate that Jonathan Clark's fate is in this film. Whereas in Man of Steel, it's him deciding not to use his power because he doesn't want to be revealed, and it's his dad sending a message of like, even in this situation, I care about you and I don't want this to befall you. Which is it's not the wrong decision. It's just it doesn't match up with where Superman ends up being or what they're trying to say. It's just all very confusing.
Yeah,
I think. Brian, do you have any? I know you're a DCU defender. You support those films. Is there any? I know it's been a while since you've seen Man of Steel, but do you have any thoughts on kind of that arc?
See, I can't. Man of Steel, it's been a long while because I saw that in theaters when it came out. So I can only praise. Yeah, so if he is different, the Pa Kent character, I think the Donner version does it excellently, where we see where his heritage comes from, like explicitly do not intervene. And then the human side is like, you're here for a reason. Like you have almost like a higher calling to do this thing. And then even after that, we see Jor-El say, it's the time to ask questions about, what it means to be here and what it is that you're supposed to do. So it does seem like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth a little bit. Like, don't change the history, but lead by example. So affect the history.
Yeah. His dads are both like not perfect people.
Right.
Sure.
We all have faults. Mine's in Arizona or whatever. Lex Luthor's quote is. But I think it is interesting, again, to the Christ parallel, which definitely is not escapable from this, is, his earthly father dies, and he has to go to his universal father, his larger-than-life father, to learn about bigger things. But his human father teaches him very important lessons, but it is like, I think what stuck out to me is right before he dies, he goes, well, I guess an old man can change his mind, or whatever. Mm-hmm. He has this moment of where he kind of goes like, you know what, I think you need to take your gifts and use them. I think the quote is that I think you were put here for a reason. The good Lord put you here for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but it sure wasn't to score touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
Which is a cool line to think about our abilities, which is like there's an ability we have within ourselves as we learn what our talents are to do good and make impact, and that's not necessarily your most fulfilling thing. Isn't going to be just to get a paycheck. As important as that is, to remember that your ability is ultimately to help humanity, but not necessarily just to cash in on what that ability is. Whereas like Clark Kent could have been a rich, if he would have kept his powers a little under wrap and he played football, I mean, he would have been the best football player that ever lived, and he would have gained earthly possessions from the money that he acquired, and he could, have all the luxuries that come with that, but that wasn't his, his dad, his earthly father instilled on him that maybe isn't the most important thing that he should use his abilities for. Not that playing football makes you a bad person. I want to say to all the footballers out there.
No, I definitely think you hit the nail on the head, Christian. It's something all of us should strive to remember.
It's why we're doing this podcast, because we
can
certainly aren't making
guys?
any fucking money off of it. So
but we're still happy to do it.
We want to perpetuate, as negative as I can be on some things, I do want to perpetuate human accomplishment and what we do in the arts and why it matters, and the conversation around that. But definitely like and subscribe. There's a 5-star review. Smash that subscribe button. Just smash it.
We'll read 5-star reviews on air.
Yeah,
if
we
you
do
leave them.
Yeah, it's a thing we do. So we're just going to ask for generosity and our effort to make the world a better place. Well, I can't think of any better points to wrap it up, but did you guys have any final thoughts on Richard Donner's Superman 1978?
This is a great movie. A lot of people don't like coming back to old movies. They just think they're inherently bad, but I think the acting in this movie is top notch. I know you mentioned a little bit of mishaps on the writing, but I thought the writing was pretty good all the way through and leads you to ask some questions and think about the
there's
characters.
some things like him getting
way.
hit in the back of the head and goes bad vibrations, and you're like, man, that joke must have smashed in 1970.
That,
Like,
I mean, it's pretty hilarious. Though. I don't know.
There are some
but
things that
what I was
definitely
saying.
timestamp this film, but
Yeah,
It doesn't hurt the movie in any way.
Yeah, I think it's like I want this movie. I don't know if you don't need to do it with Superman. I'm not saying Superman needs to be done in this way, but it is so nice to have such a positive character trying to do good. You know, like I know
it's refreshing.
Weird. It's weird to say that because
It's sad that we have to say that. You know?
No, I think it swings, it ebbs and flows in what people are looking for in pop culture, and I think those things will ring true. I think we're heading towards that. I think we're in the ebb and flow of, after this period was the 80s, and the 80s was a very, like, dark and grim, futurist type, like, dismal, like, time for writing and storytelling, with some outliers, but I do, this makes me yearn for a more positive, but I think we get that with things like Captain America, and although it is a bit dark, I think the MCU is kind of carrying the burden of having really positive but slightly flawed role models.
Yeah.
So.
With Captain America's character specifically, definitely, I would say he's a contemporary counterpart to this type of Superman. But all I have to say is there's a reason we're still talking about this movie 40 years later and still celebrating it. So if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth your time to give it a watch.
Watch it with a loved one. If you have kids, watch it with your kids. I watched it with my girlfriend, and it was really interesting. She had never seen it all the way through, and it was cool to have someone else's she had the question. She's like, "Well, why is he working as a reporter?" And it led to all this like speculation. I was like, "Oh, I don't know the answer to that question." And I was like, "Oh, I imagine he's trying
Solid question.
He wants to be covering the latest in what's going on with humans in a really big city. He wants to have an angle at controlling his representation as a figure in society. He has a little bit of weigh in with what the press thinks about him." I was like, that's a strategic element, maybe, but I think it's in an effort to get more connected with humans. But yeah, I thought that was a super interesting question.
I love that Superman is always portrayed so positively in print, in his universe, and Spider-Man is always portrayed so negatively by the Daily Bugle. They just really throw shade at that guy. But
he's sneaky. He's always crawling around.
That's true. He is sneaky.
He's a sneaky guy. So, guys, thanks for doing this. It's so glad to be back. I missed you on break.
Yeah, great to be here.
As good as the break was for our souls and our family and
we
stuff.
needed to recharge just like everybody else. Right?
We're gonna be bringing you a really great 2019. I feel like we're just warming up with what content we're gonna be putting out. We're expecting a lot. Nothing to announce today, but we're hoping to bring you really awesome stuff. If you have any ideas for what we should cover, what you like about the show, what maybe you don't like, with some specific details, please email us at popoholicscast@gmail.com. We read every single email that we receive.
Or feel free to comment on our Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. We're doing Castlevania next week.
Seasons 1 and 2.
Seasons 1 and 2. So I got lots of Netflixing to do. To catch up on that. So get prepared for that. Watch that series if you want to hear our take on it, what we think about it. Well, we don't have the element yet that we're going to be talking about it in the context, but we will get that once we see it.
Nothing says New Year's like Vampire Slayers.
What we did find out, follow us on Facebook. We got some fun polls that go on. We want you guys to contribute into that. People love Home Alone.
Oh, yeah, more than Die Hard, apparently.
I was really, putting Die Hard against anything, you need a real champ of Christmas. We were like, what's your favorite Christmas movie? Die Hard and Home Alone. Man, Home Alone, 100%?
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
I think it's like in the 80s.
You gave a guilty vote?
Yeah. We got quite a few votes on that one, and it just swung at the last second. Last I checked, it was at 100%. So
let me see.
People loving Home Alone. Maybe we'll have to cover that next to Christmas.
I think Die Hard was at like a 27%. I'm taking a look
Okay.
right now.
Ooh, Die Hard.
A little bit of representation.
Hey,
All
go
right,
on
late
Facebook
stage
if you
comeback.
feel strongly about Die Hard. Feel free to go on this page and push those votes forward.
So currently, Home Alone sits at a 73% is the best Christmas movie ever, and Die Hard is at 27%.
Yeah, that's a House majority in the House of Reps, and I believe that's any Senate vote you need. So I think it's pretty set in stone. But if you want to change that, head on over to our Facebook page. You can search for POP-O-Holics. Find us there. Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for doing this. Have a great night. We're at night. Have a great day. Have a great
Have a great week.
God.
Happy 2019, everyone.
Oh, God. Some people, I was listening to David Chen's new podcast, and he was like, I hate intros. And I realized that intros are the best, and I love them. It's the landing that I think this is a life lesson. I think the landing on most things I've ever done artistically. Am I rambling too much? See, this is the problem with endings.
Pop-O-Holics.
Pop-O-Holics.
So that Superman's not Star Wars, right? Because
That was Superman, yeah.